Hey guys, in this video we are going to be making a blanket that folds up into a pillow. To do this, we are going to be using a number 4 medium weight yarn with a 5.5 millimeter hook. I am using a red heart yarn, and you will need 2200 to 2500 yards of yarn to make this blanket. And always make sure to get enough yarn in the colors you are using to do this project. This blanket is going to be 48 inches wide, which is 4 feet wide, and that does divide into 3. So you'll want your width to be able to be divided by 3, and 48 divided by 3 is 16. And then this blanket is going to be 60 inches long, which is 5 feet long, and that can be divided by 4, and 60 divided by 4 is 15. So again, the dimensions of this blanket that we are making today are 4 feet wide by 5 feet long, and that can be divided by 3 widthwise and divided by 4 lengthwise. If you are wanting to change the size of this blanket at all, again, you will want to make sure that the widths and lengths that you are using can be divided by 3 and 4. So with our number 4 medium weight yarn and a 5.5 millimeter hook, we are going to start with a chain of 179, and that is a chain of 177 stitches plus 2 for the beginning stitch. This will make our width about 48 inches wide, and I also chose a number that could easily be divided by 3. That way when we go to make the pocket and sew it on, it will make it easier for us to figure out exactly where the middle is. So again, we are going to start with the chain of 179, which is actually 177 stitches plus 2 for the beginning stitch. And if you need to see how to do this or anything else in this video, there will be links for those videos in the description box below. If you like this video and channel, please give this a like and subscribe, and leave me a comment to tell me what you think. Also, in the description box, you can find the link to my Etsy, and there you can find the written pattern for this pattern, as well as other art that I make and sell, such as t-shirts, stencils, paintings, jewelry, and more. So please check that out. And lastly, if you'd like to keep up with what I'm doing outside of videos, you can follow me on Instagram at @thecraftnut, and you can also tag me there with the things that you make for my patterns, because I'd love to see your guys' work too. Once you have your 179 stitches worked, you may notice that your chain is not actually 48 inches long, but once you get your double crochets worked, it should lengthen that up, which doesn't always make sense, but it is the way that it works. So once you get your double crochets worked on this first row, you can go back and measure it again, and it should be about 48 inches long. So again, when you have your 179 stitches worked, we will then double crochet into the 4th stitch from the hook, and that is our 2nd stitch, the first 3 chains being our first. And then we are going to go on to work 1 double crochet in each chain all the way across this beginning chain. And when you get across this first row, you should have 177 double crochets. When you've made it to the end of that first row and you have 177 stitches, that is the end of the first row. Then we are going to turn our work, and we're going to start with the chain of 2, which does not count as a stitch, and we are going to double crochet into the same first stitch, and then we're going to work 1 double crochet into the next stitch, and each stitch all the way across this row, and this is row 2. And at the end of this row, you should still have 177 stitches. And we are going to continue doing this same thing until we have finished row 112. So as I said already, the length of this blanket is going to be about 60 inches long, which again is about 112 rows long. And again, I made it easier on myself and made the amount of rows divisible by 4. So again, I'm going to work 112 rows, which is about 60 inches long, and also divisible by 4. I am going to be using a few different colors, as you can see on the thumbnail and whatnot. So I am going to work a few rows in each color, and you can do the same, switching colors whenever you would like. Again, making sure that you do this same thing for each row, starting with a chain of 2 and working 1 double crochet in each stitch all the way across, making 177 stitches all the way across. And again, you can work whatever color pattern you would like. Okay, so I now have my blanket worked up here, which you can see. I've got it folded in 4 and 3 already. So this is about the size it's going to be. It's a little hard to gauge that with this angle right now, but we're going to move on to working the pocket. Before we did that though, I just wanted to mention that, as we all know, yarns can be different weights, even if they say they are the same weights. And so this is a number 4 medium weight yarn, and when I worked to row 112, it was not quite 60 inches. And of course I want it to be 60 inches. So I went on to work 124 rows, which is still divisible by 4. That way it's easy to divide by 4. And again, I worked to 124 rows. So again, if you're using a number 4 medium weight yarn or any other weight of yarn, and you get to 112 rows and you see that it is not 60 inches, you will just want to go on to work your blanket until it is 60 inches, and it just makes it easier for us if you keep that amount of rows a number that can be divided by 4. So now we are going to go on to work the pocket, which will be the foot pocket and the flap that we fold the rest of the blanket into to make it a pillow. So here I have 61 chains, which is actually 59 plus 2 for the beginning chain 2. And this is 59 chains because that is 177 divided by 3. So again, for the blanket, we used 177 stitches throughout the whole blanket, and 177 stitches divided by 3 is 59. So we are using 59 plus 2 for the beginning chain 2. And if you used a different amount of stitches to get your 4 feet wide for your blanket, you'll want to divide whatever amount of stitches you used by 3. And then add 2 for the beginning chain 2. When you have the amount of chains that you need for your pocket plus 2, we are then going to double crochet into the 4th chain from the hook, just like we did with the blanket. And the beginning chain 3 again does count as a stitch. This first double crochet being our 2nd stitch. And then we are going to go on to work 1 double crochet into each stitch all the way across this chain. When you've made it all the way across that first row and you have 59 stitches, or the amount of stitches on your blanket divided by 3, again including this beginning chain 3, we are then going to go on to work this the exact same way that we worked our blanket, by turning our work and chaining 2, which does not count as a stitch, and we are going to double crochet into the same first stitch and work 1 double crochet into each stitch all the way across this row. And again, this is the second row. And now you'll want to go on to work your pocket to be the amount of rows that you have for your blanket divided by 4. So again, the amount of rows that you work for your pocket is going to be determined by the amount of rows that you worked for your blanket. So for my blanket, I worked 124 rows to get 60 inches. And again, I kept that divisible by 4 to make this process easier for me. So 124 divided by 4 is 31. Therefore, I am now going to go on to work this pocket until I am done with row 31. So again, however many rows you use for your blanket, you'll want to divide that by 4 and work your pocket to be that amount of rows by the amount of stitches that you have for your blanket divided by 3. When you have your pocket worked, you should have a square or somewhat rectangle that looks like this. I have already lined mine up along the bottom here. So to line your pocket up with your blanket, you are going to want to divide your number of stitches that you use for your width in 3, just like we did to get the width for our pocket. And then you are going to want to count that many stitches in from one side and put your pocket on the next stitch, which would be the first stitch of the second third of your blanket. And you will want to connect those stitches to mark where they are at, and then line up your stitches all the way along and mark the other side of the end of the pocket with the stitch that it corresponds to. Another way to do that is by doing the same thing that you did on the first side on the other side. So count 1/3 of your stitches in, and on the next stitch mark the next stitch with the other end of the pocket, which again would be the first stitch of the second third, the middle third of your blanket, which is where you want your pocket to be. When you have the pocket lined up with the bottom of the blanket in the middle third of the blanket, we are going to sew the bottom together. And I like to sew the bottom together first, and then sew the sides together, starting from the bottom and going to the top. That way I can make sure that everything is perfectly lined up. So I started here and tied a knot on the last 2 stitches where the pocket lines up with the blanket, and we are just going to whip stitch this together. So I am holding the tail down as I go, and to whip stitch this we are going to go from the bottom to the top through the next 2 stitches and pull that through. And that's what we're going to do all the way across the bottom. So go through the next 2 stitches from the bottom to the top and pull that through. And again, we are going to do that all the way across the bottom of the pocket. And then we are going to line up the stitches along each side, starting at the bottom and going up to the top of the pocket, making sure that your rows and stitches are lined up on each side all the way up. And again, you're going to want to sew these together the same way we just sewed the bottom together. And here, really quick, I am going over how to fold the blanket into a pillow. So you'll want to start with the blanket with the pocket down and fold it in thirds, and then fold it into fourths over the pocket, like so. And then flip it over so that the pocket flap is on the top. You will then stick your hand in there into the corner and grab the rest of the blanket, and then do the same with the other corner, sticking your hand in and grabbing the rest of the blanket and pulling it through, then flattening it out, and there you have a blanket folded into a pillow. And that's all there is to it. So I hope that that was helpful and enjoyable for you. If it was, please hit that sub, like, and bell button and leave me a comment to tell me what you think. I hope that you guys go on to create many more amazing things. And until next time, guys, I'll see ya.